Hey guys, so today's topic is the Mali Empire. So the rise of Mali. Mali's original king, King Sunjata, also known as the Lion King, was born unable to walk. He eventually overcame this inability, and he was seen as a threat to his family, who was in charge there, because they thought he would eventually become king. So they actually exiled him to a neighboring kingdom. In this kingdom, that king actually found him to be a great guy and made him viceroy, treated him like a son. And all while Sunjata was in this other city, this sorcerer king known as Salmaro Kante, he eventually takes power. And he's a ruthless leader. He's known as the Sorcerer King because he keeps 9 severed heads of these tribal kings, local tribal lords that are in the area. And he wears sandals made out of human skin. So this is pretty interesting and pretty crazy stuff. And in 1235-ish, Sunjata, he eventually rallies these tribes that report to the kingdom that will eventually become the Mali Empire. And he defeats the Salmaro guy. And he actually, according to legend, he shot him with a rooster talon out of a bow and arrow. I mean, it's a really cool story. You should definitely check it out. So Sunjata becomes king, and he finds the Mali Empire. He moves the capital down to his homeland because it makes it a little safer, and the terrain there is a little better for growing. So the structure of Mali is a loose federation, local tribes kept in line by the king. The king kind of has a military method of keeping control. He uses wealth for a full-time army to protect these trade routes. In Mali itself, there's slave trade that happens, but it's not like you would find in European slavery. You have salt deposits in the north, gold deposits in the south, and this full-time army protects the salt and the gold trade. So that the salt is needed for the people who live down in the gold mines, and the gold is used to make the empire rich. Also, the geography lends to good horses. They have some plains. It's in between a desert and a jungle, so it's kind of a perfect scenario. And further in the south, you find better lands for actual growing. So Sunjata shifts the country to an Islamic state. But in all honesty, it's a cosmopolitan society. You have a high class who are probably more devout Muslims, and a low class that actually mix their local religions and Islam together. So it's a really cool mixture, a hybrid of local and foreign religions. So at this same time, because of the shift towards Islam, the relations in northern Africa, especially like Tripoli and Morocco, eventually have better relations, and therefore they can increase their trade. And at the same time, the king invades Senegal. This is a little picture of some of the trade routes that you see. As you see, most of this is on the Niger right here, which will be very important in later portions of Mali's history. So the first guy I want to talk to about is Mansa Abubakari Kinte II. He is personally one of my favorite history individuals. So he sends this exploratory group into the Atlantic, trying to figure out what exactly is out there. And the ship comes back and they report back that there's a river in the ocean, kind of insinuating there's like a Gulf Stream, like we have in America, or some type of waterway that brings you to another place. So in 1312, the Mansa gathers around 2,000 ships to go on this exploratory mission to find what's on the other bank of the Atlantic Ocean. And he specifically used the term bank. So Mansa Abubakari Kinte II gives up his throne just because he wants to know more. He wants to spread knowledge. That's why I really like him, is he's willing to give up these luxuries that he had at home, and he gives up the crown to another guy who we're going to hear about in a minute, Mansa Musa, and he ships off, and he's never seen again. Now, there's a lot of speculation that he actually landed in Brazil. Speculation, and there's some pretty significant evidence, but we don't really have enough to say yes or no. But I mean, you have to think of the size of the planet at this time, and how going from point A to point B was not something that was very easy. So, despite what we may think, this is actually a very heroic undertaking for the mindset of furthering knowledge. You don't see this in Europe. They always send other people out. You don't see this in China. They always send out envoys. So I think this is very interesting. So the next guy is Mansa Musa. He is possibly, but he is definitely the most known, or the known richest man of all time. He took power after the previous Mansa left on his expedition. Because he is a devout Muslim, or he wants to at least show the world that he is a devout Muslim, and he wants to show that Mali is this powerful nation, he decides to take the Hajj. So in Islam, every year you see people who go into this pilgrimage, and they travel from their homelands to Mecca to pray at the Kaaba. So during this caravan that he takes, or this caravan that he takes on the Hajj, it takes up about 60,000 people. So he's got 500 heralds with these golden rods at the front. He's got 12,000 servants that go, 6,000 camel loads full of golden dust. His baggage train is so long that there are accounts that it took an entire day just for them to cross. And this has all the supplies that all these 60,000 people would need. He's been said to have been just given handfuls of gold dust to strangers on the road. And his riches were so vast that every Friday, when they stopped on this pilgrimage, he would just build a mosque. So just to show you the power of his money, of how much gold we're talking this guy had, he went on a shopping spree in Cairo, where he visited the very famous Cairo markets. And he put the entire Middle East into an economic crisis because of the amount of money he pushed into their society. So he dumped so much gold that he interrupted the central one of the central regions of the planet, like one of the most powerful regions of the planet. He completely destroyed their economy, and it took him 10 years just to build that back up. So while he was gone, he also just sent his son to go conquer Timbuktu and Gao, which is kind of interesting because most people could never do something like that while they were gone. And this lavish spending encourages scholars and architects to return to Mali, and most of them will eventually settle in Timbuktu, which is the city that he wanted to kind of create as the scholarly Islam capital. And you would find more books in Timbuktu than anywhere else on the planet. And that's a pretty big saying, because having books at that time was very important. So the downfall of Mali is very complicated, and it's long and drawn out. So first, Mansa Musa dies. Then his son takes power. He dies of a sleeping disorder. Then his brother takes power. Then he dies. Internal problems have happened. They have pretty much crippled their economy due to overspending. And eventually civil war breaks out. Now, it temporarily recovers in the future or later. And this is definitely relying heavily on trade with the Europeans. And these relations would eventually create more bustling slave trade through Mali. Now, the slave trade eventually causes a shortage of people. This makes their region more susceptible to invasion, and you have groups who would eventually invade, such as the Moroccans, who invaded with a musket called an arquebus. And it slaughtered tons of the Mali's military, which pretty much makes them very weak from external powers. Then this being weak towards external powers eventually caused more internal problems, breaks the country into a civil war, and it would eventually be sacked by foreigners. So just to recap, Mali, very prosperous region in Africa in the 13th century. We have Mansu Abukari Kinte II, and I misspelled that there, I apologize. And he's the guy who set off on an expedition to discover what lied on the other side of the Atlantic. And then we have Mansa Musa, which is the richest man in the world. So Mali has a great history of wealth and knowledge. I mean, they were so adamant on pretty much gathering these scholars and books and knowledge. It was the largest conglomeration of books since the burning of the Library of Alexandria. So I definitely suggest you guys checking this empire out and finding some more information.